Is the race over? East versus West. Government issued digital currencies. The trade war goes blockchain. China and the US issue tests for new digital currencies in cold rivalry. The approaches are reflective of ideologies and needs, and both want to emerge more powerful than the other. Moderated by Bijan Alizadeh,
Phoenix,
VC, with Gary Schenkman, Leiden VC, Juan Lee, Next Change Group, Christian Heinz, Baltazar, and Pavel Kravchenko, Distributed Lab.
Great, well, welcome. And as you see, probably the moderators changed tan a little bit. So my name is Shrez Ahmed, and I'm representing the Crypto Valley Association. So I'll be taking the neutral side here, as non-biased as possible. We have some great speakers here today. So maybe I'm just going to let them introduce themselves quickly, maybe 30 seconds, and you can also give where you're coming from as well.
Hello. Oh, great, it's working. Hello, our afternoon warriors. My name is Gary Schenkman, run Leiden VC. We are an early stage VC firm based in Dubai. We invest primarily in software infrastructure all around the world.
Thanks, Gary. My name is Christian Heinz. I'm the CEO of Baltazar. We operate a regulated securitization platform in Germany and Europe.
Hi everyone, Rico Pang from Sanctum. We are a venture builder and also an investor. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Pavel Kravchenko. I'm from Ukraine. I've got a PhD degree in cryptography, CEO and co-founder of Distributed Lab, working on a lot of projects worldwide.
Hello, everyone. My name is Juan Lee. I'm from the Next Change Group, and we are an ecosystem-driven venture builder.
Thank you so much. Johnny, maybe give us a little bit of an intro into the history of government-issued digital currencies and kick us off.
Yeah, I think it's important to note where, I guess, we are and look at the history, because when you look at where China has been, they've been involved in digital currencies for over 6 years. So this is not new. They have built the most robust structure. They're already in the pilot phase, very close to where I live in Hong Kong, in Shenzhen, and 4+ other cities. They have built a platform where there's kind of 2 tiers. They're working with the banks to distribute and piloting their DCEP, and then they're going to distribute that to the general public. So in terms of where China is at, they're very developed in terms of their plan and their execution and the largest pilot program in the world for DCEP.
Great, thank you so much. And Pavel, maybe you next. I mean, I know that you're coming from Ukraine, within the East, and you said that you've been working with the government a little bit around this. Maybe give us some insights.
Yeah, Ukraine wanted to develop its own stable CBDC back in 2016. I was actually deeply involved into this pilot. It didn't go nowhere yet, so it's still there, because we will be pretty honest, they don't want to be the first, because it's very dangerous to be the first. So China can do that, and US can do that, but other countries, they just fear, a lot of uncertainty. So this is the status of most projects that I know of in this space. The smaller countries won't just see what bigger countries are about to do.
Great, thank you. Rico, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, why didn't you touch a little bit on China and how things are going there?
So just touch a bit about China and the Southeast Asia, since the East includes many other countries. And as Juwan mentioned, China has made a big leap. And in the recent launch of their digital yuan testing in several cities, and it went very well. They even did something like an airdrop to encourage the citizens of Chinese to use the digital yuan. Very interesting model. And now they have recently launched a global proposal on how digital currency should be used for cross-border and as a reference for all other central banks to adopt digital currencies. So we can see that China is moving very aggressively towards this direction. And according to our understanding from Sanctum, that the China PBOC in architecturing the digital economy and digital currency, they have 6 different digital assets to be launched. And the first one they launched was actually the digital yuan. And of course, one of the main things they might be launching very soon might be the One Belt, One Road digital asset or currency that could be used to fund a lot of infrastructures, constructions, and projects overseas that they can transact using the digital yuan rather than using US dollar as a fiat. So I think the Chinese government has a lot of policies and guidelines surrounding the future development of digital economy. For the Southeast Asia, everyone is following the Chinese leap. Thailand has made a great move in terms of launching a digital currency model. Singapore, Mass Authority, has really begun a lot of work in launching their own digital currencies. Korea and Japan as well, they are all making aggressive move. But we'll be looking at some of these countries launching their own CBDC in the next couple of 3 to 5 years' time due to political regulatory concerns they have in respective countries. And I think that's some updates from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Christian, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the German ecosystem, what BaFin is doing around the space.
I'd actually like to expand on what Rico was just saying, because I think it's so amazing that China is so far down the road. I mean, they've already processed more than 300 million US dollars in transactions on their EU1, and people can just go to their website and register there. And this website, I believe, has 16 million views per month, and that is pretty much what weather.com has. None of the other currencies actually has that, so they don't have this mind share already. And if you think 31% of the bankable people in the world are still unbanked, 1.7 billion people, 55% of them women. Most of them come from emerging economies, and emerging economies actually have adapted the CBDC more closely in a retail-focused way, since they want to basically cut out the middlemen, the commercial banks, in order to cater towards their people. And that is actually true for the Western industries as well. In the US, when they were trying to cut COVID checks, they just realized that they don't have bank details from 3 million people. So would they have had CBDC, a registration would have been way easier, and thereby it shouldn't be the focus like it is set right now. Europe is looking at a wholesale CBDC. US is just getting started with actually analyzing the projects that are possible as a layer on top of the existing monetary system. They would need to be here today, and that's thanks to these formats, in order to actually get a little bit more insight on it to leapfrog what China has already done.
No, great. I mean, Gary, please, I see you want to comment.
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly, collectivist societies and tightly controlled governments will get there ahead of social democrats, right? Because you have the entire privacy component. I mean, in the US right now, if you're the government, you have tax audit as a way to look at people's transactions. You have your regulators, and then you work with financial institutions on credit and reporting. Think about kind of the next evolution of that. If you have a government-issued token, right? You now are seeing directly into wallets, directly into transactions, directly how much is locked into a specific DeFi product. And so, that control is something that I think in the US would be extremely vigorously debated. I think in France as well, in terms of consumer privacy. But in other countries, they see the value of that, from a creating better citizens product perspective, and censorship as well. US will always, there's a really famous Winston Churchill quote, you can always trust the Americans to do the right thing after they've exhausted every other option.
Thank you. So is it really now East vs West, or as the East won then? What are your thoughts?
There's no end.
John,
no
what
end
do you
game,
think
right?
about what the guys have said so far?
Well, I think, it's kind of tortoise and hare kind of thing right now, at least as I can see. China's way ahead in terms of setting the framework. And they're clearly taking the, first mover advantage. They have put in a system in place. Now, why is it so important for US, and what is at stake? You have to understand that, everything in trade is denominated in US dollars. If that changes, that's going to have a huge impact on the US. Sanctions in terms of, the reason US has so much control over the sanctions is also that they have these, trade takes place in US dollars. So all of these things are things to consider, but I would not say that US is going to lose this in any way. They're taking the wait and watch approach. I would see that in the future they'll see the mistakes that are made and they'll be developing a very stringent or much more carefully guided plan. There is the digital dollar project that's carefully watching and devising a plan already. So we'll see what happens in the next 6 months.
I'd like to add on to that. I agree with Joanne's comment that I think it's too early to tell the race is not over yet, obviously. My argument is that the Americans are looking at the Boston Federal and also MIT are looking into this. I think they want to get it right. And they only got one chance to get it right. So observing what the other countries are doing, they're not printing a token. They're not minting any token. They are just digitizing their currencies. And that architecture is not that complicated to be implemented. And what our concerns is that, what will affect the whole old financial system and how it could be, moving towards a neo banking and banking 3.0, where there are much more citizen service focus and much more personalized services and more convenient and efficient banking services for the people. I think that is the ultimate aim. And how can they make sure that, most of the unbanked community can be provided good banking facilities and better quality of life. So I think that itself needs a lot of work and research and framework to be implemented. And it's good to see that big countries like China come out with some very aggressive framework. I think they are working along many other things, bringing people out of poverty. I think that itself make them understand how important is it to have a very solid financial system and transparency in a way in combating corruptions, abuse of power, and etc. So I think that is why I think it's posing a lot of other challenges when you implement something in a political way and both administration of a government.
Great, thank you. Let's speak a little bit more about the implications of that. I mean, you mentioned transparency. I mean, Powell, would you like to give some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I want to comment about the current status. Out of 100 billion valuation of all stable coins, US is majority. It's like USDT plus USDC, $80+ billion. And technically, you cannot do some illegal stuff in the US. And what it means that USDT and USDC have basically banking accounts in US-related countries, that means that they're at least not opposed to that. So, like with email, before it was used for, for banking, it was used in universities and private messaging. So maybe they're testing the ground with the largest one. So I wouldn't say US is behind. I think they're ahead. It just, they're testing it in a way that is natural. Like USDT is effectively a replacement of offshores. That's it. So.
Great, thank you.
No transparency, obviously.
Yeah, the
Not
other
for people.
The other question is, what is the role of government in providing the front end of financial services, right? So inclusion is a great one, but in general, U.S. usually delegates to private industry. In other countries, they're significantly more, invasive, and sometimes in Europe, right? You can, whether it's insurance or other kind of financial well-being products, the government wants to be the front end, that interaction between their citizens and that value. And so I think depending on where you are on the capitalist spectrum, the implementation will look very different country to country. Sure, USDC works.
And the implementation is basically also what you see in China. These guys are just looking for efficiency gains, and they're very adamant about it. Whilst in Western industries, they are more about risk mitigation. They have reputational risks. If they make one mistake, then obviously this has even larger reverberations than it might happen when you have trials going on in China.
I think one of the challenges that everyone is facing in terms of central bank is adoption of the technology and the use of the technology. If they were to invest so much resources to implement something like that, it has to be much more efficient and cost-saving to the country, and people have to use it. So I think that itself, looking at how the digital economy is growing globally, and with the pandemic, when a lot of things can't be done face-to-face, digital transactions has becoming a new norm in many countries, I believe. And I think moving forward, we'll be having to see some global structure on the global framework of digital currencies between central banks so they can still settle among the central banks. And that global framework has to be a consensus between the biggest power in the world. And I'm sure we can't leave US out of this, and that definitely will be involved in just a matter of time in the development of this policy.
So the interesting point to me is that even if you read, there was a PricewaterhouseCoopers report published recently on CBDC. And when you look at the terminology these guys are using, then you actually realize they are putting CBDC in one basket with, we have faster settlement times. And I'm thinking, all right, so you basically have an electronic payment system, but you call it digital currency. You're still operating on siloed data architecture and structures. You still have messaging, you still have reconciliation. CBDC would effectively render that obsolete. And they wouldn't have to actually look for better clearing and settlement terms, but they could do instantaneous settlement the moment the transaction happens because they're operating on the same ledger. And so there is something where I disagree with Pavel. I would put my hand up in favor to Asia and the Eastern economies because they seem to have at least the terminology right already. So I'm looking forward to the race.
Can I just add a point about just reserve currencies? I think it's important. When you're the US dollar and you are the reserve currency, you have to not lose. You don't have to win. So that's why they have to be so much more thoughtful and conservative. Whereas if another currency tries to take over, they have to win. So this is a very, very important distinction.
Thank you, thank you. Would you like to provide us with like an insight into the future here? Like what will the next 10 years look like? Best case scenario.
Okay, I will comment on. I think indeed, like I was in China, I was using like WeChat and payments, and it's indeed much more advanced than we use in other countries. And indeed, you need a lot of trust. It's not even about technology; it's about like trust, about monetary stability, about like all these aspects in order to become currency like number one. So what I expect in the next 10 years that many countries will be effectively using Chinese currency because they cannot use US dollar. Or it won't be it would be too hard. So I think it will be true, and like Iranians will also be using Chinese currency. So, but I don't think US kind of will be challenged in 10 years anyway.
I can see you.
So I think from my point of view, the later the central banks implement this, the better it is for the crypto space. We have a lot of opportunity for the next 5 to 10 years to develop very good technology that I don't think we need any government endorsement to implement them. And that's what the cryptocurrency has been doing since its inception of Bitcoin. Until now, there are many projects that are being implemented and technology being developed without any support of any governments. So I think itself, the longer the central banks delay this technology, transformation in digital economy, the better it is for the crypto space where a lot of things are built by people, decentralized financing, and for the people who adopt the technology. So this could be an argument, and also something that most of the policymakers out there should rethink. If they do not take action now, they are not just losing out to the other countries, but they are losing confidence from their own people to use their fiat or digital fiat.
Great. No, thank you. And I mean, this is the AIBC Summit UAE. Does anyone have any thoughts about what the UAE might be doing on this regard? Will they be bringing anything out?
Look, I don't know. At the end of the day, storage and transmission of value is the most boring, unimaginative use case of the technology, we're all building on top of. Like, right, it's, they invented email, and then for like 40 years, people were sending letters. Like, oh, we haven't figured out that we can do applications and all sorts of things that, can be accomplished with remote compute. And so the most exciting parts is that, once we have figured out at least some base layer of kind of storage and transmission of value, it's where the next generation of products can be built. Whether they're unrelated to kind of currency and value transmission in general, or we can build better, more honest, transparent, maybe profitable financial products on top of that. That is kind of the 10-year master vision. I hope we're not kind of talking about basic wallets kind of in a couple of years.
Please, go.
I think the best way for UAE is tokenize the gold.
Thank you. Juan?
My only last comment would be is that adoption is extremely hard to get, but once you get it, it's very hard to destroy. So I think there'll be both crypto, I guess CBDC and the current currency in 10 years.
I believe the next step in the evolution is actually making smart contracts that we operate today really smart, so that we can actually implement legal code in a tech layer that allows us to automatically do transactions according to what has been set. And that will probably propel the entire industry and the economy per se forward.
We should form a cross-chain arbitration center here in Dubai.
I'm in.
I think with the latest development in Dubai and UAE as a region, I think a lot of active players are meeting here and to develop something very interesting together. I think it's a melting pot where the global, currencies could be created, and we are all part of this movement. Dubai is a place where I think it's been very supportive of the digital economy developments, and I believe that in the near future, UAE will be one of the major players in the global digital currencies framework.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's a beautiful end to our conversation. I mean, collaboration, one of the #1 resounding words here. So thank you so much for attending, and thank you so much for our panelists.